The consciousness also has the ability to come down and interact with our physical reality. That's category number 2 of the traveling of consciousness, both human consciousness and non-human intelligence. The other aspect of it is that all of these contact modalities involve contact with a perceived non-human intelligence. And that's by definition.
Yeah.
In all of these contact modalities, people are interacting with intelligence. I don't like to use the word being because that word being has the connotations of physicality to it. Okay.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Thanks for tuning back in to listen to part 2, where Rey Hernandez and I discuss his latest book, The Mind of God, which is absolutely fascinating. Enjoy.
You could tell I'm over the age of 65. You know, anyone with that with that age always has difficulty with the internet.
No, that's just a belief, not a fact. Is it a
Okay,
belief that's serving you? You could change that.
Nah, I'm just having a little fun.
The mind of God.
The mind of God. Okay. Now, here is the table of contents. And what happened was this book was meant to be the introduction for these 4 volumes. Okay. Now, as I said before, I didn't make an outline. I was like, how the hell am I going to do this? You know? So I just started writing. Okay. And so here I said, okay, let me describe the different sections of the book. And these are all the different sections, okay? So people understand, okay, all of that. And then I talk a little bit about my personal journey, some of my experiences, how I arrived at, you know, my conclusions, my thesis of what's going on. So I gave people a little bit about, you know, my experiences. I started off after I talk about what the book is all about, all the different sections, all the different chapters from the different authors and my personal experiences. Then I said, that right now, what's happening now, and you could agree to it, I argue that humanity is undergoing a Kundalini awakening, okay? A Kundalini awakening. The way I describe it is that not all of humanity, but a small segment of humanity is being woken up via all the contact modalities. Understand that we are eternal spiritual beings, okay? And then if you remember that Greater Reality book, I have 4 big ones there: near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, UFOs, and spirits, ghosts and spirits. Nous is a Greek word that means knowledge. And I purposely put it in there, N-O-U-S. And those 4 first letters were much bigger than the other ones. But very few people have picked up on that, okay? So there's a lot of little hidden messages in that book. It was all things that I designed and for a meaning. But anyway, so I said, 3 out of these 4 major contact modalities were introduced to humanity on a worldwide basis within 5 years of each other. Okay. The topic that has not been introduced on a worldwide basis is the topic of ghosts and spirits. Okay. But that's been talked about since the dawn of mankind. Okay. So let's start with near-death experiences. Okay. That's the contact modality number 1. When did that get circulated around the world? That was 1975 with the publication of Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life. International New York Times bestseller, translated to all the major languages of the world. Now you could go to China or India or anywhere else. You talk about the topic of near-death experiences, and I wouldn't say everyone, but many people know what that is. You know what you're talking about. Out-of-body experiences. When did that take off? Okay. Robert Monroe published 3 books on out-of-body experiences and astral travel. The first one was 1972. Again, it was New York Times bestseller, translated to all the major languages of the world, and began to circulate all around the world, okay, in different languages. It's not as popular as near-death experiences, but still, you know, tons of people know about what is an out-of-body experience, okay? Now, the topic of UFOs, okay, that I would argue that really took off in 1970 when Star Trek got syndicated all around the world. So all of a sudden you had this black and white TV show, okay, all of a sudden being sold to all the TV networks around the world, and they were eventually translated into all the major languages. So now people knew about beings from other planets, from other dimensions, or telepathic communication, about spaceships and all that stuff. And so here you are, 1970, 1972, 1975. And what I tell a lot of folks, this is before the internet. Because right now you can put something on the internet instantaneously, it's all around the world. Back then, before the internet, you had to physically read it, you had to see it on TV, you had to have a radio show, very different to circulate information. But here it was for the history of humanity. All of a sudden, these three things were being introduced to humanity at the same exact time. Okay?
Yeah, it's interesting. They were being introduced, but there was still a collective thought form that said, this is fantasy, this is Hollywood, it's not real. Like I asked my brother years ago, do you believe in UFOs? He goes, oh, yeah, I totally believe in them, ETs. And he said, but they're not here on Earth, they can't come to Earth, it's too far. So it was introduced as an idea that exists, but it doesn't exist here. Like we're not interacting with them. So.
Yeah. But at least the concepts are being introduced, like near-death experience. I would dare to venture that you talk to most people in Western countries about the concept of NDEs, they've heard that term and they accept it. Okay, at least 50% of the people. No one's ever done. I think a couple of people have done studies about it, whether they believe in that, and they were large numbers. These are recent massive surveys. So they're slowly being introduced to humanity. And humanity's every year is going through transitions of accepting these topics, okay? Like, for example, the UFO stuff, people still see it as a materialist phenomenon. They don't still understand it as a consciousness-based phenomenon. So, but the whole point was like, why now? Why now? In the whole history of humanity, why is it being introduced within 5 years of each other? So then you look back as to why is it happening now? The reason I think it's happening now is because humanity has reached a crossroads of self-extinction, okay? Very soon, we have a decision to make. Are we going to survive as a species, or are we going to do self-extermination? We're going to kill each other off. What are the reasons? Well, one is ecological disasters, okay? People don't know, okay? In 100 years, most of the major cities along the coast, okay, along the oceans, they're not going to exist. They're going to be underwater, okay? Florida.
Whose coast? America's coast?
Well, even Europe, all the major cities, okay? You have all these major glaciologists and all these scientists and academics. They'll say, it's not even what we predicted, 5 years ago. It's much, much more worse, because they finally are able to go underneath these glaciers, and they're able to see the rapid rate that these things are starting to deteriorate, okay? And that in turn is causing a whole cycle of these other ecological disasters, okay? Florida, most of Florida is going to be underwater. New York City is going to be underwater. All the European coastal cities are going to be underwater, okay? So it's a worldwide phenomenon, and only the climate deniers are the ones that negate it. But so if anyone has a house, if you want to leave that house on the coast to your grandchildren, I highly recommend that you move inland. So anyway, then the other thing is nuclear disaster, okay? How many countries now have the nuclear bomb? It's unbelievable, the number. And Putin from Russia is like every day, every week, he's coming out, I'm going to blow up a bomb, man. I'm going to blow up a bomb, It's just to frighten, people to get able to get his way. It's like there was a period a couple of months ago that you had the foreign minister, you had cabinet members, tons of people threatening, to use the nuclear bomb. If we don't break the sanctions and all these things, And so then you've got the whole India-Pakistan thing. You've got the Middle Eastern thing with, Israel and all these other countries. It's all over the world. You've got China and Taiwan. China has this huge nuclear arsenal. North Korea and South Korea. all you need is one crazy person to flick that little button, okay? And once a little button is flipped, okay, everyone's going to be launching their missiles, okay? Same thing with these ecological disasters. What happens is all of a sudden these major coastal cities, like begin to be inundated with water. It's going to start like in 50 years. In 100 years, it'll be like these cities are going to be uninhabitable. You're going to have massive migrations, people moving outside the cities, looking for higher ground, okay? You're going to have people from other countries are going to be fleeing to other countries.
So
okay?
when do you think all this is going to start, or do you think it's started?
It's already started. It's already started. It's already started, but it's a gradual process. So these experiences are happening to us, not to the rest of humanity, but it's slowly being introduced to humanity. It's like to wake us up. Like, look, we need to become more spiritual, much more loving. You have to understand that you are an eternal, conscious spiritual being, and that you need to change your ways. You are a warmongering people. You are barbarians. If you come back from a near-death experience, what do you learn? The most important experience is that love. Love is the key word.
Let me ask you this, Ray. Why do you think that people that are so-called in power, like politicians or heads of state or royals, why do you think they haven't had near-death experiences?
They should. If you have a near-death experience, then you're changed, like we were talking about before.
Right, but why do you think they haven't had the near-death experiences?
These are questions that are beyond my grasp.
Okay.
All I know is that if one of these major politicians anywhere in the world has a near-death experience, they're going to be changing their tune. They're going to be changing. They'll kick them out of their political party. All of a sudden, it's going to be Mr. and Mrs. Love and Light, dancing around, preaching spirituality.
I had a guy on the show recently called Samuel Shen Chong, who is a Chinese guy that has taken up the mandate. There was a French-Australian guy called Michel Desmarquet, who was abducted, if you like, taken to another planet by highly evolved civilization. They said it was a Category 9 planet, and shown the way they live. And these were 9-foot tall, hermaphroditic, evolved beings that had complete mastery over molecular structure, so they knew how to manifest at will. So they're physical beings, a physical experience, but with the same abilities as what happens when we're a spiritual being. We can think and our thoughts manifest almost instantly. And that was a very real physical experience. He was taken in his physical body, and what was really interesting, Ray, is that in order for him to be with them, they had to detox him something terrible, because the bacteria in his body and the way that we eat and the pesticides and all the stuff that were completely toxic to this race of people. And in order to do a really good job on detoxing his body, they took him out of his body. They gave him a little pill, and he went flip, and he flipped out of his body. And
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now that experience that man had, there are literally tens of thousands of similar but different experiences.
Yeah,
okay?
I've spoken to a few, but
yeah, there's tens of thousands of different types of beings that people are interacting with.
But these beings say that they're overseeing. They're over.
Well,
beings.
I know who that man is. It's one man that went to Asia and spent several weeks interviewing this man about his experiences.
Yeah, that's right.
But what I'm saying is that these experiences, I could tell you thousands of different similar experiences.
Yeah,
they're all very different. Okay,
but what I'm saying is that these beings said that they oversee the evolutionary process of this world, along with many other planetary beings, higher civilizations, and that the nuclear, destruction, they won't let that happen, because it's not, they don't mind if we blow ourselves up, but it affects the rest of the universe. And so if we explode nuclear bombs that, destroy a lot of Earth, we're also, the impact of that, affects the rest of the universe. So they won't let that happen. This is what, these beings are saying.
This is now we're getting into a little bit more in depth in terms of the topic of my book. So I'm going to be skipping over a whole lot of different topics, but basically what I discuss in our book is you have, at least in terms of the ufology aspect of it, you have tens of thousands of different types of beings that people are interacting with. Okay, they're all unique. They're all very individuated, just like near-death experiences, just like astral travel experiences. All of these experiences are all unique experiences for that person. Okay, now there are several basic themes, like this whole theme that you just mentioned, is that they're not going to let humanity to blow each other up because of the secondary impacts that's going to that's been experiencers have received that same messages in many, many different ways. Okay, via out-of-body experiences, being UFO related, brought to other realities, numerous ways that same message that you just told me is being conveyed. What is happening is that a lot of people still have this physicalist mindset that the beings that they're interacting with still have a major physical component to them. Okay, now these experiences that we're having, they're both physical and psychic. Okay, that's been understood by, as I said before, Alan Hynek, Jacques Vallée, John Mack, Edgar Mitchell, Mary Rodwell, and all these researchers. Okay, but the way you need to understand it is that you need to compare it with the other contact modalities and be able to come up with an explanation. So one way of thinking it is these tens of thousands of different beings that people are interacting with. Okay, there was even one lady that she saw. It was like a booger, like a mucus, that was huge. That was like 4 or 5 feet wide. That was hanging on the corner of her kitchen, communicating with her telepathically. Okay, so that this booger being come from a booger planet. Okay, people have seen tons of different types of perceived physical beings. That they come from tens of thousands of different planets. Okay, I would argue no, because these beings interact with these individuals for the overwhelming majority of these experiences for only a few seconds or less than 30 seconds. So did they come from another physical planet to interact with you for 20 seconds? No. Okay. These experiences, the way to be able to think about it is that if you view the nature of our reality, the nature of consciousness, okay, just like an NDE experience or like an astral travel experiences, okay, all of them are all uniquely different. You talk to astral travel experiences, okay, they're all unique, but they all have the qualities that it is perceived as very, very physical, but yet it's not physical, okay? So what it is that these are manifestations. These are holographic projections that are projected into our consciousness, okay, by the mind of God to be able to interact with us, okay? And they're doing it in very, very unique ways for the individual, just like a near-death experience. It's all very uniquely tailored for that person. Some people see the being that they identify as God as Jesus Christ. Some as Buddha. Some there was a Jewish woman that saw she was interacting with 2 rabbis. Okay, the vast majority are light beings or energy beings. Okay, even with the UFO contact experience, the number one category of people interacting with were different forms of energy beings. Okay, number 2 was the human-looking being, but there were literally thousands of different types of human-looking beings that people identified. Some were very human-looking. Some were 15 feet tall. Some were very small, 2 feet tall. Some people had uniforms. Some people wore monk's robes, different colors for the monk's robes, white, brown were the main colors. Other people had like Greek tunics. Other people have Roman tunics. Some people had insignias. I mean, we're talking about a whole smorgasbord of human-looking beings. And then we get into the humanoid beings that, they had arms and legs and a head, that sort of thing, but there were literally tens of thousands of different humanoid types of beings. Okay, so but then they interact with these experiences for a very short, limited period of time. Okay, so the other way of looking at this is that if there's something that I talk about in my book is it's a philosophical definition of the nature of our reality, and it's called dual aspect monism. Okay, and dual aspect monism basically holds the premise that consciousness is primary, and I have a whole section in there in my book about the topic of what is consciousness, the mind-body problem. And again, we're talking about the physical aspect of it and the psyche, non-physical aspect. That's the whole aspect of the mind-body problem. And then I talk about the whole traditions of consciousness and the science-based aspect of it, the neuroscience aspect of it, the quantum physics-based aspect of it. And then I go into the whole history of idealism, that all of these cultures, all of these traditions viewed the theory, the philosophy that consciousness was primary. And I start off with the shamanic tradition, the ancient India with the Vedanta, the Upanishads, the Buddhist tradition, the Egyptian tradition, Greek and Roman tradition, and then how that changed when Descartes and the whole shift to Cartesian dualism, began. And then I describe this whole aspect of monism, and in particularly dual aspect monism. And what that tells us is that before we are born, we are consciousness, eternal spiritual beings. So we're interacting with this environment, with the mind of God, which is the source of our creation. And at that point, it's an idealistic concept, okay, that there's no physicality to it, okay? It's all psyche. But once we are born and we reincarnate into this physical reality, then our consciousness then splits off to a physical mindset and to a conscious mindset. Okay, the conscious mindset is the whole nature of our reality and our still connection as conscious, eternal spiritual beings. But in order for us to be able to learn lessons, to apply lessons while we're in this physical reality and to accomplish our tasks, okay, we have to interact with the physical. And so what the dual aspect monism aspect says is that our consciousness gets divided into two subsets. Okay, and that's where you get this whole aspect of the physicality and the non-physicality. But then when we die, all of a sudden the physical aspect is gone, and we revert back to just solely the consciousness, psyche aspect of our consciousness. And so, again, I'm giving a very brief and simplistic documentation, but basically, in our physical reality, we have this perception of our reality as very physical. But in reality, that's an illusion. And that was discussed by all of the different traditions, from the shamanic tradition, the Vedanta tradition from ancient India, the Buddhist tradition, Egyptian tradition, Greek and Roman traditions, et cetera, that basically hold the same philosophy that our reality is an illusion. It's not our real reality. And so what I discuss then, the next section of my book is I have 11 categories of how all of the contact modalities are interrelated. Okay. And I start off with the concept of a manipulation of space-time. Okay. All of the contact modalities involve a manipulation of space and time. If you're having a near-death experience, you're outside of space-time. If you're having an out-of-body experience, you're outside of space-time. If you're having an astral travel experience, if you're remote viewing, okay, all of a sudden your consciousness travels to another location. You're able to see things, clairvoyance, mediumship, communicating with the deceased, et cetera, involves a manipulation of space-time. What we learned from our research study was that the UFO contact phenomenon also involves a manipulation of space-time. Like people were brought to other realities 50% of the time. Like what happened to me, okay? People being brought to other realities. My friend Alberto, I highlighted him in my book. He's seen tons of UFOs, okay, just like Dr. Melinda Greer, okay? But yet they're having all these paranormal experiences. So their experiences involves a manipulation of space-time. Another aspect of is travel of the human consciousness and non-human intelligence consciousness up the whole hierarchy of dimensions, okay? We can travel up like when we have a near-death experience, or when we have astral travel experiences, or we go out of body and interact with our physical reality, but yet the human consciousness also can go back to our physical reality. Same thing with these perceived non-human intelligence, which are interdimensional in nature. Okay, you can think of your Aunt Sally, that when she dies, okay, you might see her 2 days later as in physical form. So you see her in her favorite dress, but you know that you just came from her funeral and she was buried 2 days ago. Okay, so the consciousness of Aunt Sally has the ability that once she dies to go up, but the consciousness also has the ability to come down and interact with our physical reality. That's category number 2 of the traveling of consciousness, both human consciousness and non-human intelligence. The other aspect of it is that all of these contact modalities involve contact with a perceived non-human intelligence. And that's by definition.
Yeah.
In all of these contact modalities, people are interacting with intelligence. I don't like to use the word being, because that word being has the connotations of physicality to it. Okay.
Yeah. Can I share something with you that's happened to me recently? First of all, I want to ask you, have you been in contact with Dr. Ervin Laszlo and looked at any of his work?
Yes, I'm familiar with his work. And we had actually one of his very close colleagues, who's a physicist from Cambridge. She initially started astrophysics, and she's a major experiencer. And she wrote several books with Ervin Laszlo. Her name is Curvin, Dr. Goodness, what's her first name? I totally forgot about it. So yes, I am familiar with his work. And,
well, recently a friend of mine passed over, and before he died, he was dying for a good 8 months. You know, he had a big tumor, and the doctor said, "Oh, you're about to die. You're about to die." So for about 8 months, he felt like every minute he was about to die, which was a bit of an experience for him. And he didn't believe in life after death, which was interesting, because he hung around the conscious community in Sydney, spiritual community, and we all talk about this stuff all the time. But when push came to shove, he admitted that he didn't believe in life after death, and so he was terrified to die.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And he hung on for a while. Anyway, and he didn't want to talk to me because he knew that I spoke about this stuff all the time, and he wouldn't let me see him. I just basically didn't see him this whole year before he died. Yeah. And I had to accept that. I just had to accept where he was, and I knew that I'd see him after he passed. Anyway, I didn't realize how I would see him after he passed, but since he's passed, he's been teaching me about life after death, which I find really interesting.
It's an extremely common phenomenon. And
what he's taught me, he's like such a master teacher, and it's so funny that he didn't believe in it before he died, but he thinks that personality that he donned as the human was hilarious. When I talked to him about that, he goes, "Wasn't I a great character?" You know, like the fact that I didn't believe in life after death, and that, you know, I was scared and everything. He sees that as like watching a great sitcom movie. But when he is communicating with me, because I know him well, when I was receiving communication, I was testing it with the guides. I said, how do I know this is not just a memory of him? Am I really receiving some communication of him, or am I just having a memory of him and just putting words to my memory? And then he gave me an image of a memory of him, and he said, "Feel the difference." And I had a memory of him, and I said, "Yeah." And then he came and started communicating with me, and then he said, "Feel the difference between the two communications." And what he was showing me was that he was projecting thought at me. It's like he wasn't turning up in his astral body that looked like what he looked like on Earth.
No.
He was now existing in an energy form, but he was projecting thought and giving me thought, which encompassed him looking a certain way and speaking. So he was showing me that when you speak to the dead, you know, it's like they're actually projecting a thought, a download at you, like they're giving you information.
Exactly. The term there is projection. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Projection.
And if they wanted to project a different, view of this person, if they wanted to, they could project that, of what he looked like or anything else.
Exactly.
Okay? These are all open in terms of
But
projections.
where, like you said, that these experiences are holograms. And, 30 years ago, I saw Deepak Chopra talking about how this is a hologram, and when we understand that this is a hologram, the reality of beam me up, Scotty, will become our reality. Because when we understand we are holograms in the mind of God, then we'll understand that we can manipulate molecules, just like, we can, what do you call it? Travel, like beam me up, Scotty. What do you call it? Teleport.
Yeah.
The molecules. And it was interesting because I was at Shiva. We were sitting Shiva for him because he was Jewish, and I said that he appears to me, he looks around 40. And then my friend said to me, but I thought when you die, you're not in a physical body. You're not in a physical body anymore, so you don't look 40. And I said, well, he's projecting an image of what he looked like at 40.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just like in an NDE, when people meet deceased relatives, there's this projection of what they looked like when they were young, 30 years old,
Right.
So these are projections from the mind of God,
Right.
Now, you were mentioning the whole aspect of telepathic communications. That's item number 4, because I just used 11 examples to show how all of them have these descriptions. And the item number 4 is telepathic communication in your native language, okay? No matter if you have an NDE in Czechoslovakia, it's a Slavic language, If it's in Spanish, it's being communicated to you in Spanish, If you're an English speaker, the telepathic communication is in English, Rarely do you get these communications in a different language than what you are at, okay? Mm-hmm. Secondly, the all communication, okay, in all of the contact modalities is all telepathic. I've never met one person that's had any of these tens of thousands of different perceived physical beings communicate them with their tongue, with their mouth, flapping, Each of these is telepathic. Why? Because it's all consciousness based. Okay. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, category number 5 is the discussion of this whole aspect of holographic projections. Okay. How when you're in an out of body state or astral travel, these are holographic projections. When you're in NDE experiences, holographic projections with the mind of God, okay? With here in our physical plane, these are holographic projections. Just like I stated, how all of a sudden I said, you better come up with some better bullshit than this because my friends don't believe you. And then boom, instantaneously that was wiped away and a new image was presented, okay?
Yeah, and the mosquitoes too.
And the mosquitoes, yeah. Mm-hmm. I could have bet my last dollar that these mosquitoes were biting me, Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I never saw them. But in my mind, I said, they're eating me up,
Yeah.
And then my daughter says, no, she was right next to me, though.
There's a great book by Richard Bach, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's about a hypnotist. And he talks about this hypnotist who's on stage, and he hypnotizes this man to believe that he's enclosed in a cage that's made of brick, and he can't get out, no windows. And so this man is banging on these brick walls, and his fingernails start bleeding, but he's actually standing on stage inside space, right? Yeah. But he's been hypnotized to believe that he's having a holographic projection, and his reality is that his physical body starts to bleed when he's just hitting what everyone else is perceiving as air. It's really fascinating how all this stuff works, isn't it? Right?
Well, I mean, when I was in freshman year in college in 1975, there was this very well-known man. His name was the Amazing Kreskin. Mm-hmm. That he would go to different colleges and he would do these hypnotic shows, mm-hmm. where he would put these people in a hypnotic stage. And these are one person I knew, it wasn't fake. They had them quacking like a duck on the stage, walking like a duck. And with all these people, he said, okay, I'm going to count to 3 and snap my finger and you're going to wake up. And all of a sudden they woke up. They were like, where was I? What happened? Why did I, And so this whole aspect of being able to control someone's conscious thoughts,
right?
Just like that being did with me in my living room.
Yeah. Okay. And this was a question I wanted to ask you about an hour and a half ago. We've been talking for nearly 2.5 hours, I think. But at the beginning, when you said to your wife, "This is crap," and you went upstairs to bed and fell asleep. And you've realized that they had taken control of your mind and they just moved you out of the way. Why did
it was afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think that they did that? Do you think that?
Okay. I think I know why they did that. Okay. The reason was that my wife had called the mind of God, to
Angels.
help her, these angels to intervene. Okay.
Mhm.
And so all of a sudden, the mind of God came down and said, okay, let's help her out, and let's cure this dog. Okay. And so it appeared in that type of format, because we saw two different formats. She saw like a physical upside down you that would phase in and out of reality. Like at 1 second, it would be very, very physical, very silverish, that it looked like a little craft. Okay. And then all of a sudden it would be like Star Trek dematerializing in front of her and be translucent, and she said that it didn't like her questioning it, because she would go to the windows and move the curtains around, because she thought it was something that was a projection from the light outside. Okay. But it was like still almost dark outside. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and so she said it didn't like it. So that's why it dematerialized when she started doing that. But once she stopped doing it and started interacting with it, then it became fully materialized. But that was totally different from what I interacted with. You see what I'm getting at? And similar to like my experience outside. These are two totally different things that I was interacting with outside, with that perceived, UAP, UFO, whatever, which I call consciousness aerial phenomenon, CAP. Okay. And so anyway, getting back to just to finish these 10 similarities, commonalities of the contact modalities, was number 5 was the whole aspect of all of these experiences involve holographic projections. Number 6 is the paranormal, the after effects of these paranormal experiences, whether it's NDEs, UFOs, astral travel experiences, the people that do mediumship. All of a sudden, these people totally change their personality profile and worldviews. That's number 6. Number 7 is that all of these experiences involve medical healings. Okay. With near-death experiences, there are like hundreds of cases that have involved a medical healing as a result of a near-death experience. Okay. The most famous case was Anita Morjani, but there are like tons of other cases, which I highlight in my book. Well, one is Eben Alexander, a medical doctor from Harvard. He was a professor, a brain surgeon at the Harvard Medical School. His brain was like mush. Okay, it was mush, and they were about to turn off his breathing apparatus, his life support, because he had no brain activity. All of a sudden, his son said, "Give him one more day, give him one more day, give him one more day," and convinced his mother, and they left him one more day. And all of a sudden, he started to get some electrical activity. Okay, now you listen to this man, and they did a peer-reviewed academic article by these 3 medical doctors that were professors of psychiatry, and that were hospital people, professors that focus on the brain, right? And it was impossible what happened to him. This man should have remained a vegetable the rest of his life. Okay. And so those are just 2 examples, but there are literally hundreds and hundreds of these examples. Same thing with UFOs. I mentioned that half of the people had medical healings, that these were these UFO contact experiencers. Same thing with all of the paranormal. These people have had tons of medical healings with people that do mediumship, astral travel experiences, et cetera, et cetera. Number 8 is visions of the future and the past. Okay. All of these contact modalities involve receiving information about what our future is going to look like and what experiences of the past. Okay. Not just with life reviews we're talking about. We're talking about UFO contact experiences that were shown visions of their life, except also visions of the future. And that's where the ecological stuff comes into place, with the nuclear weapons comes into place. But it's not just NDEs and UFO people, it's many of the other contact modalities. Topic number 9, commonality, is, as I said, is the total worldview transformation, the personality transformation. What I didn't mention was number 6. What it is that once you have one of these experiences, all of a sudden it triggers paranormal experiences. Okay, like most of these major experiences, a lot of these major experiencers have had near-death experiences, and after they have a near-death experience, all of a sudden they have an explosion of paranormal experiences. Okay, but it's not necessarily only gets started by a near-death experience. A lot of people have had UFO contact experiences, like in my case. After you've had that UFO contact experience, all of a sudden there's an explosion of paranormal experiences. So these experiences are also called spiritually transformative experiences, because in many of these experiences, it involves a total spiritual transformation. But I think using that term is quite self-limiting to just the topic of spirituality. But one of the topics is that the paranormal gets triggered after you have one of these major experiences. Then number 10 is the whole concept of spiritual awakening and the concept of God, that people then all of a sudden become deeply spiritual and begin to approach the topic of the afterlife, that they're eternal spiritual beings, and then the topic of a universal mind, a non-religious God. Okay. Then chapter 11 is that all of these experiences involve the projection of the importance of love. Okay, people never associated with the UFO contact experience or this whole aspect of love. They always associated with near-death experiences. Okay, if you come back from an NDE, the most important message they tell you is about love. That when we come back, we need to learn how to love. Okay, but the same thing happens with UFO contact experiencers. It was like 80% of these people eventually realize the importance of love. Okay, and how we need to change and become much more loving beings. With the NDE, it's like, boom, it's like once you come back, you're taught that lesson up in this perceived heaven. But with the UFO contact phenomenon, it involves a series of teaching lessons over the many, many, many years. So the point is that 80% of these people begin to understand the relationship of love. And that is in tangent with the concept of spirituality. But that's just not NDEs and UFO contact experiences. It also involves astral travel experiences, out-of-body experiences, people that are involved with mediumship, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many of these people that get involved in healings, energy healing. They become Reiki masters, They get deeply into the whole, New Age spirituality aspect of it. So anyway, and then the last part is I talk about the topic of reincarnation, that both the UFO contact experiencers have received messages about reincarnation, and also the NDE contact experiencers have received messages of reincarnation. And a lot of people, the very major astral travel experiencers, have received that information as well about reincarnation. And then I talk about in ancient India, how they viewed reincarnation. In ancient Greece, the whole Jewish Kabbalist traditions. Then I talk about the academic research of Dr. Ian Stevenson and Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia. And then I provide charts of models to illustrate these concepts so the person takes a look at it. Okay. But I think what half of my book is about these commonalities, how they're all interrelated with each other. Okay. The other half is like laying out theoretical foundations, like talking about, idealism. What is idealism? That consciousness is fundamental. And then talking about the whole aspect of neuroscience, of quantum physics, and the Kundalini awakening. Why is all of this happening at the one time? And so this is the introduction titled The Mind of God, where I present my theory of how all of this is all interrelated. And then I also address the question of the mind-body problem from an experiencer perspective. Like you mentioned, this man, he's had these experiences with these perceived physical beings where he's being taught these things. So my response to that is like, if I had $1 for every story that I heard like that, that I could buy a car with it, because there are literally thousands of people that are receiving very similar stories, but they're all different. They're all unique. Instead of the being that he described, it's a totally different being.
Did you hear about the Elizabeth Clara case, the South African woman who was
tell me about it.
Who was taken to Alpha Centauri by a 6-7 foot ET called Archon, and she was taken to he was Venusian. They came originally from Venus, but Venus went through its evolutionary cycle, and they all left and they went into the Alpha Centauri system, and they inhabited 8 planets there. And she was.
This is just an example. You're giving me 2 examples, but what I'm telling you is that there are literally thousands of these similar stories. How do I know about this? Because I read the details of these people's experiences, what they wrote. Okay.
Well, Elizabeth died in the 90s, in her 80s.
I remember reading.
But
fascinating.
In the 50s, she was doing talks on her experiences all over the world and speaking to scientists and dignitaries. I mean, there was like maybe it was the 70s, but anyway, it was a long time ago. She was talking about this openly. It was in the newspapers and everything. It was quite amazing.
I think it might have been 50s and 60s. I read about her. It was unbelievable, fascinating, her stories. And I know that she wrote a book about it. And what I was reading were these secondary articles about her experiences and videos. I even heard some of her videos on YouTube. Fascinating. But again,
the book was called Beyond the Light Barrier, and she was about to write a book about the anti-gravitic technology that propelled the vehicles, but she died before she got that information out. But I think it's come through other people.
But what I'm saying is, again, is that her story, that man that lived, I think it was Thailand, I forgot what country it was.
Vietnam.
With this, Vietnam. Okay.
Vietnam.
It was a Chinese-speaking man that read that book and traveled to Vietnam. Yeah, Samuel. Yeah, I've had two discussions with him on Zoom. And as a matter of fact, I sent them a copy of my book. And so what I was trying to convey to Samuel was that, look, Samuel, I don't want to bust your bubble, but I've read literally thousands of similar experiences, but they were all uniquely different. Okay. Some people were brought to this constellation, other people were brought to other constellations. Some of them were humanoid beings, some of them were more human looking beings. It's like these are all common descriptions of an experience. And the way I interpret it, as I said before, that these are all not, tens of thousands of different beings coming from 10,000 different planets and people having unique experiences. As I said, most of these experiences only last a few minutes. It's not like you're a whole day with a being, it just doesn't work that way. But what it is that this is the mind of God giving you a teaching experience, not for you to. Yeah,
I agree. I think we've got to wrap this up there because we're coming up to 3 hours.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. But I also think that there are some experiences that are also real. And I've got to say, those 2 experiences, Elizabeth Clara actually had a child. She was impregnated and she had a child. So it's pretty hard to sort of fake a pregnancy, like a holographic. Anyway, but
again, what I'm getting at before we wrap up is that, yes, these experiences are very physical, okay? But it's also very psyche. You cannot.
But everything is psyche, as we've said, everything.
Yes.
To the person living in another planet, this experience of planet Earth, I mean, if they heard about it and they experienced it in their astral, they would think it was fantasy as well. It's our reality, but to somebody else,
correct.
It's a holographic projection.
That's the whole basic bottom line that I'm trying to convey in the book. As to the complexities of this, that people are all interpreting it as very physical. Here's a being from another physical planet. And I had this physical experience. But what I'm saying is that, yes, you are interpreting it as a physical experience, but it's much more deeper, much more complex than that. And so this book here, The Mind of God, is just the introduction to the 4-volume book series. And volumes 1 and volume 2 are going to be coming out within a week. But The Mind of God, you can check it out. It's available for $10 on Kindle. It's like the price of a 6-pack of beer, So if you're hard on cash, whatever, get it for Kindle. You get this entire book. All the other books that I'm going to be putting out are also going to be $10 on Kindle.
So
as I said, the price of a 6-pack.
You're self-publishing all of them? They're all
self-publishing because if you go with a private publisher, no, we can't put out an 800-page book. How we're gonna make some money on it? We're gonna sell it for $45. It's a 800-page book.
So
and I'm not saying. Yeah.
You have a group on Facebook called Contact Modalities, Consciousness and Contact. There's about 7,600 members. It's Do you want people to go there to sort of discuss this stuff?
Those are for experiencers if you want to talk to other experiencers. So that's, the experiencer side of it. The academic side of it, the research side, is the website. And I said, go to our website. We're still working on it. By next Monday, it should be opened up, all the changes that we made.
And the website is not experiencer.org.
No, that's the old one.
That's the old one.
Yeah, it's info@agreaterreality.com. Info@agreaterreality.com.
That's the email address.
I'm sorry. It's agreaterreality.com.
Agreaterreality.com is the okay. Yeah.
And if you want me to send you those free copies of the first book, and then information about our this next project, A Greater Reality in the Mind of God, send me an email. My email is info@agreaterreality.com.
Yeah. Fabulous. Rey Hernandez, it's been epic today, I tell you. I might need to break this up into 2 sections. I don't know if everyone will stay.
Yeah. Break it up into 2.
But it's been so beautiful to talk with you again. Thank you so much for
thank you so much, Karen. These topics are not easily digestible, as you know. Okay, for some people it might be woo-woo, information, but this is all information based upon what modern science is finally talking about, and what we're doing is we're mixing it with the experiencer. Okay, to try to be able to understand the complex nature of our reality, which is a multi-dimensional reality based upon consciousness. Why? Because consciousness is fundamental. Our physical reality is just an illusion. It's very physical, very real to us. I mean, someone punches you in the face, you're going to feel it, okay? But you have to understand that behind all of that, there's some complexity behind that. And that's what our book series is all about, trying to be able to present in a layman's perspective so anyone can understand it, some of these sophisticated new paradigm discussing the nature of our reality.
Yeah. Well, Sheila and I wanting to get a panel discussion together on what's happening in our world, on the shift in the reality on our world. And I invited you. You said yes. We've moved that to November, December now. We were going to do it in October, but other things are happening. So I look forward to seeing you again on the panel discussion. We'll get people like you and Preston Dennett and Grant Cameron and Alan Steinfeld and, a few people that are in the area. If you've got anyone else that you think you'd like to come on to discuss.
Mary Rodwell.
Oh, well, we're doing the guys. We did the women. Mary came on. We did the women. Okay. We called it Galactic Goddesses Connect Hearts Across the Water. We're calling this one Galactic Guides. Guys Connect Across the Water, Connect Hearts.
Okay.
So this is for the guys, and we did the women before. Yeah, Mary came on with the women, but I look forward to chatting to you again for that. Thank you, Rey. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. If you want to have any of the academics that work with us, we can get them on board because these are close friends of mine.
Like Rudy and
Michael Grosso is a wonderful person. He's also an experiencer, a major experiencer.
Well, yeah, we might. Yeah.
Might. So he can give it to you from a different perspective because he's in a major experiencer, and he's written like 15 books. Most of them have dealt with the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's a brilliant man. And
his name's Michael.
Dr. Michael Grosso, Grosso. And you could read about his bio and some of his books in our website, agreaterreality.com.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember that website is it's still in its draft form. There's a guy that's working behind the scenes making all the changes. So in about a week, on Monday, a week from today, we're going to be putting out the actual website, which is very different from what you see.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I look forward to it. Big love to you.
Okay. Thank you so much for the invitation, and break it up into 2 because people don't want to listen to this boring conversation for 3 hours.